When the 10-year-old boy with grease-stained hands and clothes that had seen far better decades offered to fix the gleaming obsidian luxury sedan, he did so, never knowing the man inside was Arthur Vance, a billionaire whose empire was built on cold, hard calculations, not charity. He was unaware that this man, cocooned in the silent opulence of his broken-down vehicle, was a ghost haunted by the memory of a son he had lost, a son who had loved the simple honesty of engines and machines. The boy, Leo, only saw a stranded motorist on the grimy edge of the city's forgotten industrial sector, a place where hope was a currency scarcer than coin. "I'll repair your car for a meal," he had cried, his voice small but clear against the mournful howl of the wind, unaware that this simple, desperate plea would not just fix a car, but begin the painstaking work of mending a broken man, and, in turn, rewrite the trajectory of his own life, proving that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can purchase what all the money in the world cannot: redemption. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. Thank you. The rain began to fall then, a cold, persistent drizzle that mirrored the bleakness of the abandoned street. Arthur Vance watched the boy through the tinted window, his expression a mask of weary skepticism. He had been on his way to a groundbreaking ceremony for his latest skyscraper, a titan of glass and steel that would scrape the heavens and add another zero to his net worth. Yet, here he was, immobilized by a mechanical failure in a part of the city he usually only saw from his private helicopter, a place of rust and decay. The boy stood his ground, his small frame unbowed by the downpour, a tattered jacket pulled tight around him. Arthur saw the raw hunger in the boy's eyes, a look he hadn't encountered since his own childhood, a lifetime ago. It was a hunger that went deeper than just food. It was a desperate yearning for a chance. Any chance. Against his better judgment, against the chorus of warnings from his security detail that echoed in his memory, he pressed a button, and the car's window glided down with a soft, expensive hum. The sounds of the desolate street rushed in, the drumming of the rain on the car's roof, the distant wail of a siren, the boy's quiet breathing. "You think you can fix this?" Arthur's voice was gravelly, laced with the impatience of a man for whom time was a commodity he refused to waste. Leo nodded, his gaze fixed not on the man's stern face but on the front of the car, where a faint wisp of smoke still curled from under the hood. "I know engines," the boy said. A simple declaration of fact. There was no boastfulness in his tone, only a quiet confidence that was startlingly at odds with his impoverished appearance. Arthur considered the boy for a long moment. He saw the grime under his fingernails, the worn-out soles of his sneakers, the fierce, determined set of his jaw. He saw a reflection, faint and distorted, of the boy he himself had once been. A boy who had learned the language of machines in a dusty garage. A boy who had dreamed of building empires. The memory was a ghost, and it pricked at him with a familiar ache. He had built his empire, but the cost had been immeasurable. The joy had long since been replaced by the relentless, crushing weight of success. He thought of his own son, Thomas, who would have been around this boy's age. Thomas, with his bright, curious eyes and his love for taking things apart just to see how they worked. The thought was a dagger to his heart. He made a decision. A small, impulsive act that deviated from the carefully orchestrated script of his life. "All right," he said, his voice softer than before. "Get in." He unlocked the doors, and the boy, without a moment's hesitation, circled around to the passenger side, his movements quick and purposeful, as if he were afraid the offer might be rescinded. The rich leather of the seat sighed as the boy sat down, leaving a damp imprint. The scent of rain and poverty filled the climate-controlled air of the car, a stark intrusion into Arthur's sanitized world. The boy didn't speak. He simply stared out at the rain-streaked windshield, his small hands resting on his knees. Arthur watched him, a strange mix of emotions swirling within him. Pity, curiosity, and a profound, unsettling sense of recognition. He had everything, and this boy had nothing. Yet, in that moment, sitting in the silent, broken-down car, the vast chasm between their worlds seemed, for the first time, to be bridgeable. He didn't know it then, but this small, greasy-handed boy was about to become the most important investment he would ever make. An investment not of money, but of something far more valuable, a piece of his own fractured humanity. The engine was silent, the rain was falling, and in the heart of the forgotten industrial wasteland, a story of redemption was about to begin, all because of a boy's desperate cry and a rich man's flicker of a long-buried memory. It was a beginning, cloaked in the gray misery of the afternoon, but a beginning nonetheless, a fragile spark in the overwhelming darkness. Leo, once inside the car's opulent interior, seemed oblivious to the luxury that surrounded him. He didn't run his hands over the polished wood grain or marvel at the intricate dashboard. His focus was singular, his mind already working on the problem at hand. He leaned forward, his nose almost touching the windshield, peering intently at the front of the vehicle. "It's the alternator," he said, his voice muffled by the glass. The belt probably snapped. Arthur was taken aback. His own highly paid mechanic had, over the phone, suggested a dozen more complicated and expensive possibilities, from a faulty fuel pump to a catastrophic engine failure. This child, with a single glance, had offered a diagnosis that was both simple and plausible. "How can you know that from in here?" Arthur asked, the skepticism returning to his voice. Leo turned to him then, and for the first time, Arthur saw the full force of the boy's intelligence in his dark, serious eyes. "The way the lights flickered before they died," the boy explained, his words precise. "And the smell. It's like burnt rubber." The belt got hot before it broke. He spoke with the authority of a seasoned professional, not a 10-year-old in ragged clothes. Arthur found himself at a loss for words. He was a man who commanded boardrooms, who could dismantle a rival company with a single phone call, yet he was being schooled in the mechanics of his own multi-million-dollar car by a child who had offered his services for the price of a meal. The irony was not lost on him. He felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. Admiration. "All right, kid," he said, a grudging respect in his tone. "Let's see what you can do." He popped the hood from inside the car, and the boy was out of the door in an instant, the rain plastering his thin hair to his scalp. Arthur watched from the dry comfort of the car as Leo, with a focused intensity that was almost unnerving, began to examine the engine. The boy's small hands moved with a deftness and certainty that belied his age. He didn't have any tools, but that didn't seem to deter him. He used his fingers to test the tension of the remaining belts, his eyes scanning the complex web of wires and hoses. He was completely absorbed in his work. A small, solitary figure against the backdrop of urban decay. The rain continued its relentless assault, but Leo seemed not to notice. He was in his element, a world of gears and pistons. A world that made sense to him. A world that, unlike the one of food and shelter, he could control. Arthur felt a strange pull, a desire to get out of the car, to stand in the rain with the boy, to see what he was seeing. It was an irrational impulse, one that he quickly suppressed. He was Arthur Vance. And Arthur Vance did not stand in the rain. He paid people to do that for him. And yet, he couldn't take his eyes off the boy. He saw in Leo's focused gaze the same passion he had once seen in his own son's eyes, when Thomas was building elaborate structures out of toy blocks, his small tongue sticking out in concentration. The memory was a fresh wave of grief, and he had to close his eyes for a moment to fight it back. When he opened them again, Leo was walking back towards the car, his face grim. He got into the passenger seat, shaking his head. "The belt is gone," he said. "And the alternator is seized up. I can't fix it without parts and tools." The hope that had briefly flickered in Arthur's chest died out. Of course the boy couldn't fix it. It had been a foolish, sentimental whim to even think he could. He was about to reach for his phone, to call his driver to come and pick him up, to leave the boy and the car and this whole miserable experience behind, when Leo spoke again. "But I know where to get them," he said, his voice low but firm. "There's a scrapyard, about a mile from here. Old man Hemlock runs it. He has everything. If you can give me some money, I can go and get what we need." The boy's persistence was remarkable. He wasn't giving up. He was proposing a solution, a plan of action. He was, in his own small way, taking charge of the situation. Arthur looked at the boy, really looked at him, and he saw not a beggar, but a problem solver. He saw resilience, ingenuity, and a spirit that refused to be broken. It was the same spirit that had driven him to build his own empire from nothing. For the second time that day, Arthur Vance made a decision that went against every one of his instincts. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a thick wad of cash, and handed it to the boy. "Get what you need," he said, "and be quick about it." He didn't know if he would ever see the boy or his money again, but in that moment it felt like a risk worth taking. The boy, whose name Arthur still hadn't bothered to ask, took the money with a solemn nod, his small hand closing around the bills as if they were a lifeline. He didn't count them, a detail that Arthur found strangely impressive. It was a sign of trust, or perhaps of a desperation so profound that the exact amount was irrelevant. "I'll be back in an hour," Leo promised, and then he was gone, disappearing into the gray, rain-swept landscape like a phantom. Arthur was left alone in the silence of his car. A silence that was more profound than the absence of engine noise. It was the silence of his life, a life filled with the hollow echoes of success. He watched the spot where the boy had vanished, a strange feeling of unease settling over him. He had just entrusted a significant amount of cash to a complete stranger, a child no less, in one of the most dangerous parts of the city. It was a foolish, reckless act. The kind of thing he would have fired an employee for without a second thought. Yet, he felt no regret. Instead, he felt a flicker of something else. Something he couldn't quite name. It was a feeling of connection. A fragile thread spun in the space of a few short minutes. A thread that tied him to the fate of this small, determined boy. He leaned his head back against the soft leather and closed his eyes, the events of the past hour replaying in his mind. He had started the day as he always did, with a cold, analytical review of the global markets, his mind a fortress of numbers and projections. Now, he was sitting in a broken-down car, his fate, at least for the moment, in the hands of a 10-year-old mechanic. The absurdity of the situation was not lost on him. He thought about his own son again. Thomas would have loved this. He would have been fascinated by the boy, by his knowledge of engines, by his fearless self-reliance. Thomas had been a gentle soul, a boy who had been more interested in the inner workings of things than in the trappings of wealth that surrounded him. He had been, in many ways, the antithesis of his father. And Arthur, in his relentless pursuit of more, had failed to appreciate that until it was too late. He had given his son everything money could buy, but he had failed to give him the one thing that mattered: his time, his attention, his understanding. The grief was a physical thing, a heavy weight in his chest that never truly went away. He opened his eyes and stared out at the rain, at the desolate, forgotten corner of the city that he owned but had never truly seen. He saw the boarded-up factories, the graffiti-scarred walls, the skeletal remains of a once thriving industrial heartland. This was the other side of his success, the decaying underbelly of the gleaming city he had helped to build. These were the people and the places that had been left behind in his relentless march of progress. He had never given them a second thought. They were just collateral damage, the unfortunate but necessary casualties of a free market. But now, sitting in his broken-down car, he was one of them, at least for a little while. He was stranded, helpless, dependent on the kindness of a stranger from this very world he had ignored. The hours stretched on, each minute a slow, agonizing crawl. The initial flicker of hope began to fade, replaced by the cold, familiar certainty of disappointment. The boy wasn't coming back. He had taken the money and run, just as any sensible person in his position would have done. Arthur had been a fool, a sentimental old fool, to have trusted him. He was about to reach for his phone, to finally call for help, to erase this whole sorry episode from his memory, when he saw him. A small figure, hunched against the wind and the rain, was walking towards the car, carrying a heavy, greasy bag. It was Leo. He was back, and in his hand, he clutched not just a collection of used car parts, but a small, flickering flame of hope. A flame that Arthur Vance had thought had been extinguished in his own heart long ago. Leo climbed back into the car, his face flushed with a mixture of cold and exertion. He placed the heavy bag of parts on the floor mat, the metal clanking softly. He was soaked to the bone, his thin jacket offering little protection against the relentless downpour. He was shivering, but his eyes were bright with a triumphant light. "I got it," he said, his voice breathless. "Old man Hemlock tried to overcharge me, but I told him it was for a V12 engine, and he knew I knew what I was talking about. He gave me a good price." Arthur was momentarily speechless. The boy had not only returned, but he had successfully navigated a transaction with a scrapyard owner. A feat that Arthur suspected would have challenged many of his own highly paid negotiators. "You did well," Arthur said, the words feeling inadequate. He wanted to say more, to express the strange sense of relief and gratitude that was washing over him. But he didn't have the words. He was a man who spoke the language of contracts and spreadsheets, not of human emotion. Leo didn't seem to notice. He was already focused on the next task. "I need to get back out there," he said, his hand on the door handle. "It's going to take some time to replace the alternator. And I'll need some tools." "I saw a toolbox in your trunk." Arthur, without a word, popped the trunk. He was no longer a skeptical observer. He was a willing participant in this strange, unfolding drama. He watched as Leo, with a renewed sense of purpose, got out of the car and went to the back to retrieve the toolbox. It was a top-of-the-line set, a gift from his wife on his last birthday. A gift he had never even opened. He had no use for tools. He had people for that. But now, in the hands of this small, determined boy, they were about to be put to their intended use. For the next hour, Arthur sat in his car and watched Leo work. The boy was a whirlwind of focused energy, his small hands moving with a practiced, almost artistic grace. He worked with a meticulous precision, each movement deliberate and efficient. He seemed to know the engine intimately, as if he and the machine were old friends. The rain had subsided to a light drizzle, but the air was still cold and damp. Arthur, despite the car's powerful heating system, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. He was watching something extraordinary, something raw and real, and profoundly human. He was watching a boy who, despite having nothing, was giving everything he had to a task. Not for the promise of a great reward, but for the simple satisfaction of a job well done. He was watching a display of integrity and dedication that he had not witnessed in a very long time, not even in his own boardrooms, where fortunes were won and lost on a daily basis. He thought of the men and women he employed, the brilliant minds and ruthless executives who drove his empire forward. They were all, in their own way, incredibly skilled and dedicated. But their dedication was fueled by ambition, by the desire for money and power and prestige. Leo's dedication seemed to come from a different place, from a deeper, purer source. It was the dedication of a craftsman, of an artist, of someone who found meaning and purpose in the work itself. As the light began to fade, casting long, eerie shadows across the desolate landscape, Leo finally straightened up, his small body silhouetted against the dying light. He wiped his greasy hands on a rag and walked back to the car. His face streaked with grime, but his eyes shining with a look of profound satisfaction. He got into the passenger seat, the smell of oil and metal clinging to him like a second skin. "Try it now," he said, his voice quiet but confident. Arthur took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He turned the key in the ignition. The engine, after a moment's hesitation, roared to life, its powerful purr filling the silence of the late afternoon. The headlights cut through the gathering gloom, illuminating the rain-slicked road ahead. The car was fixed. The boy had done it. He had performed a small miracle in the heart of a forgotten wasteland, and in doing so, he had somehow, in some small, inexplicable way, begun to fix the broken engine of Arthur Vance's own soul. A profound silence settled inside the car, broken only by the steady, powerful hum of the newly repaired engine. The dashboard lights glowed, the climate control system whirred back to life, and the opulent interior was once again a self-contained world, a bubble of warmth and luxury against the encroaching twilight. Arthur sat with his hands on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He was a man accustomed to being in control, to having his orders followed without question, to seeing the world bend to his will, but in this moment he felt a humbling sense of powerlessness. He had been completely dependent on this small, ragged boy, this child who had appeared out of the rain like some kind of grimy, streetwise angel. He turned to look at Leo. The boy was leaning back in the seat, his eyes closed, a faint smile on his face. He looked utterly exhausted, the adrenaline of the past few hours having finally worn off. The grime on his face couldn't hide the sharp intelligence in his features, the quiet dignity in his posture. He was a child, but he had the weary, knowing eyes of an old man. "You were right," Arthur said, his voice hoarse. It was the alternator. It was a simple statement, but for Arthur, it was a significant admission. It was an acknowledgement of the boy's expertise, a concession of his own ignorance. It was, in its own small way, an apology for his initial skepticism. Leo opened his eyes and looked at Arthur. The smile was gone, replaced by a look of quiet seriousness. "Engines don't lie," he said, echoing the words of some long-forgotten mechanic. "They tell you what's wrong, if you know how to listen." Arthur nodded slowly. The boy's words resonated with a truth that went far beyond the mechanics of a car. He had spent his life dealing with people who lied, who schemed, who hid their true intentions behind a facade of flattery and deceit. He had become a master at navigating this treacherous world, but it had left him jaded and cynical, unable to trust, unable to connect. This boy, with his simple, unvarnished honesty, was a revelation. "I owe you more than a meal," Arthur said, his voice filled with a genuine gratitude that surprised even himself. He reached for his wallet again, intending to give the boy a reward that would be more than fair, a sum of money that would likely change the boy's life. But Leo held up his hand, stopping him. "A deal is a deal," the boy said, his voice firm. "I said I'd fix your car for a meal. That's all I want." Arthur was stunned. He had never met anyone who had turned down his money. In his world, money was the ultimate motivator, the universal language, the solution to every problem. But this boy, who clearly needed it more than anyone Arthur had ever met, was refusing it. It was an act of defiance, an assertion of a different kind of value system, a system that Arthur had long ago forgotten existed. "Why?" Arthur asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why wouldn't you take the money? You've earned it." Leo looked away, his gaze fixed on the darkening world outside the car window. "My dad," he said, his voice so quiet that Arthur had to lean closer to hear him. "He was a mechanic, the best there was. He taught me everything I know. He always said, 'A man's word is the only thing he truly owns. Don't ever sell it cheap.'" The boy's words were a punch to the gut. They spoke of a world of honor and integrity, a world that Arthur had once known but had long since abandoned in his climb to the top. He thought of his own father, a hard-working man who had died with calloused hands and a clear conscience. What would his father think of the man he had become? The question was a painful one, and he had no easy answer. He looked at the boy, at this small, impoverished child who possessed a wealth of character that dwarfed his own vast fortune, and he felt a profound sense of shame. He had been so focused on acquiring the trappings of success that he had lost sight of what it meant to be a good man. This boy, in the space of a few short hours, had held up a mirror to his soul, and Arthur did not like the reflection he saw. The promised meal was not at a fancy restaurant with white tablecloths and sommelier, the kind of place Arthur frequented out of habit rather than enjoyment. Instead, at Leo's quiet insistence, they went to a small, brightly lit diner a few miles away, a place with cracked vinyl booths and a jukebox that played old, forgotten songs. The air was thick with the smell of frying onions and brewing coffee, a smell that was both foreign and strangely comforting to Arthur. It was the smell of ordinary life, a life he had not been a part of for a very long time. They sat in a booth by the window, the city lights twinkling in the distance like a galaxy of fallen stars. Leo ordered a cheeseburger, fries, and a chocolate milkshake, his eyes wide with a childlike delight that was in stark contrast to the old soul seriousness he had displayed earlier. He ate with a voracious appetite, a poignant reminder of the simple, desperate hunger that had initiated their strange encounter. Arthur, for his part, ordered a cup of black coffee, his own appetite having long since been replaced by a gnawing emptiness that no amount of food could fill. He watched the boy eat, a strange mix of emotions churning within him. He felt a paternal affection for this small, resilient child, a feeling that was both heartwarming and deeply painful. It was the same feeling he had had for his own son, a feeling he had thought he would never experience again. He found himself wanting to know more about this boy, about his life, about the father who had taught him about engines and honor. "Tell me about your dad," Arthur said, his voice gentle. "You said he was a mechanic." Leo looked up from his burger, a flicker of sadness in his eyes. He swallowed his mouthful and took a long sip of his milkshake before he answered. "He was the best," he said, his voice filled with a quiet pride. "He could fix anything." He had his own shop, a small place, but it was his. We were happy. The use of the past tense did not escape Arthur's notice. "What happened?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Leo looked down at his plate, his small hands tracing the rim. "He got sick," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "The doctor said it was from the chemicals he worked with, the asbestos in the old brake pads. It happened fast. One day he was fine, the next he was gone." The boy's words were simple, stark, and utterly devastating. They painted a picture of a life cut short, of a family shattered by a tragedy that was as common as it was cruel. Arthur felt a familiar ache in his chest, the phantom pain of his own loss. He knew what it was like to have his world ripped apart, to be left with nothing but memories and a gaping hole where a loved one used to be. "I'm sorry," Arthur said, the words feeling hollow and inadequate. He wanted to offer comfort, to say something that would ease the boy's pain, but he knew that there were no words that could do that. There was only the shared, silent understanding of grief, a bond that transcended the vast social and economic chasm that separated them. Leo looked up, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It's just me and my mom now," he said. "She works 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night. But it's not enough. We lost the house, the shop, everything. That's why we live here now." He gestured vaguely with his head, indicating the forgotten, industrial part of the city they had just left. "That's why I need to work. I need to help her." The boy's story was a litany of hardship and loss, a story that would have broken a lesser person. But Leo spoke without a trace of self-pity. He spoke with a quiet, steely determination. The determination of a survivor, of a boy who had been forced to become a man long before his time. Arthur looked at this small child, who was carrying the weight of the world on his narrow shoulders, and he felt a surge of something he hadn't felt in a very long time. A sense of purpose. He had spent the past few years adrift in a sea of meaningless acquisitions, of empty victories. He had been building a legacy of steel and glass, a monument to his own ego. But now he saw a different kind of legacy, a legacy that was not built of bricks and mortar, but of human connection, of compassion, of kindness. He saw a chance to make a difference, to use his immense wealth and power for something more than just personal gain. He saw a chance to honor the memory of his own son by helping this boy, by giving him the future that had been stolen from him. The diner buzzed with the quiet murmur of late-night conversations and the clatter of cutlery. But for Arthur and Leo, their small booth had become an island of intimate revelation. The initial transactional nature of their meeting had dissolved, replaced by a raw, unfiltered honesty that was both unnerving and liberating for the billionaire. He was seeing the world through the eyes of this child. A world stripped of its illusions. A world of stark realities and simple, profound truths. He learned that Leo's mother, Maria, was a woman of immense pride and resilience. A woman who worked her fingers to the bone to provide for her son. A woman who had instilled in him the same unwavering sense of integrity that his father had. He learned that Leo spent his days scavenging for scrap metal, doing odd jobs for the few remaining businesses in the industrial sector. And, most importantly, studying. The boy was a voracious reader, devouring second-hand books on engineering, physics, and mathematics, teaching himself the theoretical knowledge to complement his practical skills. He was, Arthur realized with a jolt, a prodigy, a brilliant mind languishing in the shadows of poverty. A diamond in the rough waiting to be discovered. The thought of such a talent going to waste was not just a tragedy, it was a moral failing, a failing of the very system that had allowed Arthur to amass his own fortune. He had always believed in the myth of meritocracy, the idea that anyone with talent and drive could succeed. But looking at Leo, he saw the lie at the heart of that myth. He saw that talent and drive were not enough. They needed opportunity. They needed a foothold. They needed someone to open a door. And in that moment, Arthur Vance decided that he would be that someone. He would not just give the boy a handout. He would give him a hand up. He would give him the one thing that money, in its rawest form, could not buy: a future. When Leo had finished his meal, scraping the last of the fries from his plate with a contented sigh, Arthur leaned forward, his expression serious. "Leo," he said, using the boy's name for the first time, "I want to make you a proposition." The boy looked at him, his dark eyes wary. He had learned from a young age to be suspicious of offers that seemed too good to be true. "It's not charity," Arthur said, as if reading the boy's mind. "It's an investment in talent." He then laid out his plan, his voice low but firm, the voice of a man who was used to making things happen. He would set up a trust fund for Leo, a fund that would cover his education, from the best private school in the city to any university in the world he chose to attend. He would also provide a comfortable home for him and his mother, a place where she would no longer have to work 2 jobs, a place where she could rest and watch her son flourish. And in return, all he asked was that Leo continue to learn, to grow, to pursue his passion for engineering with the same dedication and integrity he had shown that afternoon. He asked that the boy, one day, use his talents to build things that would make the world a better place, things that would help people, things that would honor the memory of his father. When Arthur had finished, Leo was silent for a long time, his small face a mask of conflicting emotions. He was stunned, overwhelmed, and, above all, suspicious. He looked at Arthur, his gaze searching, trying to understand the man's motives. "Why?" he asked again. The same question he had asked in the car. A question that cut to the very heart of the matter. "Why would you do all this for me?" This time, Arthur had an answer. He reached into his wallet, but instead of pulling out money, he took out a small, worn photograph. It was a picture of a young boy with bright, smiling eyes, standing proudly next to a complex structure he had built out of wooden blocks. "This was my son, Thomas," Arthur said, his voice thick with an emotion he no longer tried to hide. "He died a few years ago. He was about your age. He loved to build things. He had your same passion, your same spark. When I look at you, I see him, helping you. It's like I'm helping him. It's like I'm giving him the future he never had." He slid the photograph across the table. Leo picked it up and looked at the smiling boy. And in that moment, the last of his suspicion melted away. He saw the truth in Arthur's eyes, the raw, unvarnished pain of a grieving father. He understood that this was not about charity, or pity, or even investment. It was about something far more profound. It was about redemption. It was about two broken souls finding a way to heal each other. The transition from a life of scarcity to one of abundance was not without its challenges. For Leo and his mother, Maria, it was like stepping into a different world. A world they had only ever seen in movies or magazines. Their new home was a spacious, light-filled apartment in a safe, quiet neighborhood. A stark contrast to the cramped, dilapidated tenement they had left behind. Maria, a woman who had not known a day of rest in years, found herself with time on her hands. Time to read, to walk in the park, to simply be. It was a gift she accepted with a quiet, tearful gratitude. A gratitude that she expressed to Arthur not in words, but in the delicious, home-cooked meals she insisted on making for him whenever he visited. Leo, for his part, was enrolled in the city's most prestigious private school, a place with manicured lawns, state-of-the-art laboratories, and a student body composed of the children of the city's elite. It was an intimidating environment, and at first, he felt like an outsider, a fish out of water. The other children, with their expensive clothes and casual, unthinking privilege, didn't know what to make of the quiet, serious boy from the wrong side of the tracks. They whispered about him in the hallways, their curiosity tinged with a cruel, childish snobbery. But Leo was not one to be easily intimidated. He had faced far greater challenges than the petty cruelties of spoiled children. He had his father's resilience, his mother's quiet strength, and now he had Arthur's unwavering support. He threw himself into his studies with a ferocious intensity, his brilliant mind soaking up knowledge like a sponge. He excelled in math and science, his intuitive understanding of complex concepts astonishing his teachers and silencing his doubters. He quickly rose to the top of his class, his academic achievements earning him a grudging respect from his peers. Arthur became a regular presence in their lives, a mentor and a friend to Leo, a surrogate son he had never expected to find. He attended Leo's parent-teacher conferences, his chest swelling with a pride he had not felt since his own son was alive. He took Leo to museums and art galleries, to concerts and sporting events, opening up a world of culture and experience that the boy had never known. But their favorite moments were spent in the garage of Arthur's sprawling mansion, a space that Arthur had converted into a fully equipped workshop, a mechanic's paradise. It was here, surrounded by the smell of oil and metal, that their bond was truly forged. They would spend hours together, working on old classic cars that Arthur had collected over the years, their hands greasy, their conversation easy and punctuated by the comfortable silence of shared understanding. Arthur, who had not picked up a wrench in decades, found a surprising joy in the simple, honest work of fixing things. It was a welcome respite from the abstract, high-stakes world of corporate finance, a way to connect with the boy he had once been, the boy who had dreamed of building things with his own two hands. In Leo, he saw not just a reflection of his lost son, but also a reflection of himself, of the passion and the drive that had once fueled him, a passion that had been buried under the weight of his own success. And Leo, in turn, saw in Arthur not just a benefactor, but a father figure, a man who believed in him, who challenged him, who saw his potential and was determined to help him realize it. He learned from Arthur about the world of business, about the intricacies of finance, about the art of the deal. He saw that wealth and power could be a force for good, that they could be used to build not just skyscrapers, but also futures. It was a symbiotic relationship, a partnership of two disparate souls who had found in each other the missing pieces of their own lives. They were a strange, unlikely family. A billionaire, a working-class woman, and a boy genius, bound together by a chance encounter on a rainy afternoon, by a shared grief, and by the transformative power of a single act of kindness. Years passed, and the boy who had once offered to fix a car for a meal grew into a confident, brilliant young man. Leo graduated from high school at the top of his class, his valedictorian speech a moving tribute to the father who had taught him the value of hard work. the mother who had shown him the meaning of unconditional love, and the man who had given him a future he had never dared to dream of. He was accepted into the world's most prestigious engineering program. His application accompanied by a letter of recommendation from Arthur Vance that spoke not of his academic achievements, but of his character, his integrity, and his unwavering moral compass. His university years were a time of explosive intellectual growth. He thrived in the challenging academic environment, his mind a fertile ground for new ideas, new theories, new ways of looking at the world. He was not just a student. He was an innovator, a visionary, a young man who was destined to leave his mark on the world. He spent his summers interning at Vance Industries, not in a cushy executive-level position, but in the company's research and development department, working alongside the brilliant engineers who were designing the technologies of the future. He was not just an intern. He was a colleague, his ideas and insights valued and respected. He developed a revolutionary new type of engine, a design that was more efficient, more powerful, and more environmentally friendly than anything that had come before. It was a breakthrough that would not only change the automotive industry, but would also have far-reaching implications for a world grappling with the challenges of climate change. Arthur, who had watched Leo's progress with a mixture of pride and awe, knew that the time had come to make good on his own promise. He had always known that Leo was destined for greatness, but he had never imagined the scale of the boy's ambition, the sheer audacious brilliance of his vision. He offered Leo a position as the head of a new division of Vance Industries, a division dedicated to developing and implementing sustainable technologies, a division that would be funded with a significant portion of Arthur's own personal fortune. It was an unprecedented offer, a testament to the immense faith and trust that Arthur had in the young man he had come to regard as his own son. But Leo, to Arthur's surprise, turned him down. It was not a rejection of Arthur's generosity or a denial of their deep personal bond. It was, instead, an assertion of his own independence, a declaration of his own unique vision. "I can't accept your offer," Leo said, his voice filled with a quiet, respectful determination. "But I have a counterproposal. I want to be your partner. I want to build something new, something that is not just a division of your company, but a new company altogether. A company that is founded on the principles of innovation, sustainability, and social responsibility. A company that will not just make a profit, but will make a difference." He then laid out his plan, a bold, ambitious vision for a new kind of corporation, a corporation that would measure its success not just in dollars and cents, but in the positive impact it had on the world. It was a vision that was both idealistic and pragmatic, a vision that combined the sharp business acumen he had learned from Arthur with the deep-seated sense of social justice he had inherited from his parents. Arthur listened, his initial surprise giving way to a profound sense of admiration. He saw in Leo's eyes the same fire, the same passion, the same unwavering belief in the power of ideas that had once driven him. But he also saw something more. He saw a wisdom and a compassion that he himself had only found late in life. He saw a leader, a visionary, a man who was not just going to change the world, but was going to make it a better place. He had invested in a boy, and in return, he had been given a legacy that was far more valuable than all the skyscrapers and corporations that bore his name. It was a legacy of hope, of innovation, of a future that was brighter and more sustainable for all. "Yes," Arthur said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Yes, I will be your partner." And in that moment, the student became the master, the prodigy became the pioneer, and the boy who had fixed a car for a meal was about to fix the world. The launch of Helios Motors, the company co-founded by the young engineering prodigy Leo and the seasoned billionaire Arthur Vance, was met with a mixture of skepticism and intrigue by the business world. The old guard, the established titans of the automotive industry, dismissed it as a vanity project, a rich man's idealistic folly. They saw Leo as an upstart, a naive idealist who did not understand the harsh realities of the global market. They predicted a swift and spectacular failure. They could not have been more wrong. Helios Motors was not just another car company, it was a revolution on wheels. The first car they produced, the Griffin, was a masterpiece of engineering and design. A vehicle that was not only aesthetically stunning, but also a marvel of sustainable technology. Its revolutionary engine, a refined version of the design Leo had developed during his university years, produced zero emissions, its only byproduct a thin, harmless vapor of water. It was a car that was not just good for the planet. It was a joy to drive. Its silent, powerful acceleration a thrilling testament to the future of transportation. The Griffin was an instant success. A cultural phenomenon that captured the imagination of the public and sent shockwaves through the automotive industry. The old, gas-guzzling behemoths that had dominated the roads for a century suddenly looked like relics of a bygone era. The established car companies, who had once scoffed at the idea of a viable electric car, were now scrambling to catch up, their frantic efforts a belated acknowledgement of the paradigm shift that Helios Motors had initiated. Leo, the once unknown boy from the wrong side of the tracks, was now a celebrated innovator, a tech world celebrity. A visionary who was hailed as the face of a new, greener industrial revolution. He was on the cover of magazines, a sought-after speaker at international conferences, a role model for a new generation of entrepreneurs who believed that it was possible to do well by doing good. But through it all, he remained grounded, his success never eroding the core of integrity and humility that had defined him since he was a boy. He never forgot where he came from, the struggles he had overcome, the people who had helped him along the way. He established the Helios Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to providing educational opportunities for underprivileged children, a foundation that was funded by a significant portion of his own personal wealth. He wanted to give other children the same chance that Arthur had given him, to open the same doors, to create the same pathways to a brighter future. Arthur, for his part, took a step back from the day-to-day operations of Helios Motors, content to act as a mentor and a guide, a wise elder statesman who watched with a quiet, immense pride as his protege changed the world. He had found in his later years a sense of purpose and fulfillment that had eluded him during his long, relentless climb to the top. He had learned that true wealth was not measured in the size of one's bank account, but in the richness of one's relationships, in the positive impact one had on the lives of others. He had found in Leo not just a business partner, but a son, a family, a legacy that would endure long after he was gone. Their story, the story of the poor boy and the wealthy businessman, became a modern-day fable, a testament to the power of kindness, the importance of opportunity, and the extraordinary potential that lies dormant in every human soul, waiting for a single act of grace to set it free. It was a story that reminded the world that sometimes the most profound and lasting investments are not the ones made in the stock market, but the ones made in each other. The grand opening of the Thomas Vance Memorial Engineering Academy was a testament to the enduring power of their story. The Academy, funded entirely by the Helios Foundation, was a state-of-the-art institution built in the heart of the very same industrial wasteland where Leo and Arthur's journey had begun. The once decaying landscape, a symbol of urban blight and forgotten dreams, had been transformed. The boarded-up factories had been torn down, replaced by gleaming new buildings, by green spaces, by a campus that buzzed with the energy of a new generation of innovators and problem-solvers. The Academy was a beacon of hope, a place where bright, underprivileged children from all over the city could receive a world-class education in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, regardless of their background or their ability to pay. It was a place where other Leos could be discovered, where other brilliant minds could be nurtured, where other futures could be rewritten. The dedication ceremony was a grand affair, attended by city officials, by educational leaders, by the titans of the tech industry. But the most important guests were the students themselves, a diverse and vibrant group of young people whose eyes shone with a mixture of awe and ambition. They were the living embodiment of Leo and Arthur's shared vision, the inheritors of a legacy that had been built on a foundation of compassion and mutual respect. Leo, Now a man in his prime, a confident and charismatic leader, stood at the podium, the gleaming new academy behind him, the adoring crowd before him. He spoke not of his own success, but of the people who had made it possible. He spoke of his father, the mechanic who had taught him the language of engines and the importance of a man's word. He spoke of his mother, the tireless warrior who had sacrificed everything for her son. And he spoke of Arthur, the man who had seen something in a small, ragged boy, and had taken a chance that had changed both of their lives forever. He looked at Arthur, who was sitting in the front row, his aging face a mask of pure, unadulterated joy, tears streaming down his cheeks. And in that moment, the vast, cavernous hall was filled with a palpable sense of love and gratitude, a powerful emotion that transcended words. Later that day, after the crowds had dispersed and the speeches had been forgotten, Leo and Arthur walked together through the empty halls of the academy, their footsteps echoing in the quiet, reverent space. They stopped in front of a large, black-and-white photograph that hung in the main lobby. It was a picture of a smiling, 10-year-old boy, his face streaked with grease, his hands holding a wrench, standing proudly in front of a gleaming luxury sedan. "I remember that day," Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. "I was so lost, so broken. I had everything, and yet I had nothing. And then you came along." Leo smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "We were both broken," he said, "and we fixed each other." They stood there for a long time. Two old friends, two partners, a father and a son. Their shared past a testament to the extraordinary journey they had taken together. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow through the large glass windows of the academy, illuminating the faces of the two men who had built it. It was the end of one story, but it was also the beginning of countless others. The stories of the young men and women who would pass through these halls, who would go on to build their own futures, to make their own mark on the world, all because of a chance encounter on a rainy afternoon, because of a simple, desperate plea, because of a single, transformative act of kindness. The legacy of the boy who had fixed a car for a meal was not just a company, or an academy, or a fortune. It was a ripple of hope that would spread out into the world, touching countless lives, changing the world in ways that neither he nor Arthur could ever have imagined. And it all began with a simple, profound truth. A truth that had been spoken by a small boy in the front seat of a broken-down car. Engines and people can always be repaired if you just know how to listen. The years that followed were a golden age for Helios Motors and the Thomas Vance Memorial Engineering Academy. The company continued to innovate, pushing the boundaries of what was possible in the world of sustainable technology. Its influence spreading far beyond the automotive industry. It became a global leader in renewable energy, in smart grid technology, in the development of new materials that were both durable and biodegradable. It was a company that was not just profitable, but also beloved. A brand that was synonymous with progress, with integrity, with a hopeful vision of the future. The Academy, in turn, became a model for educational reform, its graduates some of the most sought-after engineers and scientists in the world. They were not just brilliant minds, they were also compassionate leaders, young men and women who were instilled with a deep sense of social responsibility, who were committed to using their talents to solve the world's most pressing problems. They were Leo's children, the inheritors of his legacy, the living proof that talent is everywhere, and that it only needs a chance to flourish. Arthur, in his later years, found a peace that had eluded him for most of his life. He had finally reconciled with the ghosts of his past, the memory of his son no longer a source of pain, but a source of inspiration, a guiding light that had led him on an unexpected journey of redemption. He spent his final years surrounded by the love of his adopted family, his days filled with the simple, profound joys of mentoring the students at the academy, of watching the company he had helped to build change the world for the better. He died peacefully in his sleep. A man who had started his life with nothing, had built an empire, had lost everything that mattered, and had, in the end, found a wealth that was far more valuable than anything money could buy. His funeral was not a somber affair, but a celebration of a life well lived, a life that had been transformed by the power of human connection. The eulogy was delivered by Leo, his voice thick with emotion but his words clear and strong. He spoke not of Arthur the billionaire, but of Arthur the man, the mentor, the friend, the father. He told the story of their first meeting, of the rainy afternoon, the broken-down car, the offer of a meal. It was a story that had been told many times before, a story that had become a part of the city's folklore. But hearing it from Leo, in that moment, it was as if the world was hearing it for the first time. He spoke of the lessons Arthur had taught him, not about business, but about life, about the importance of second chances, about the redemptive power of kindness, about the enduring strength of the human spirit. Arthur Vance built many things in his life, Leo concluded, his voice ringing with a conviction that filled the cavernous cathedral. He built skyscrapers, he built corporations, he built a fortune, but the greatest thing he ever built was a future. He built a future for me, for the students of the academy, for a world that is cleaner, greener, and more hopeful because of his vision. He was a great man, and I will miss him every day of my life. But his legacy will live on, in the company we built together, in the students who will carry his name into the future, and in the simple, profound truth that he taught me all those years ago, that the greatest investment we can ever make is in each other. The story of Leo and Arthur, of the poor boy and the wealthy businessman, became a legend, a story that was passed down from generation to generation, a story that continued to inspire and to move, a story that served as a timeless reminder that even in a world that can often seem dark and divided, there is always hope, there is always the possibility of connection, and that the smallest spark of kindness can, in the end, illuminate the world. The legacy of Helios Motors and the Thomas Vance Memorial Engineering Academy continued to grow, its influence spreading like the ripples from a stone cast into a pond. The company, under Leo's continued leadership, became a model for a new kind of capitalism. A capitalism with a conscience. A capitalism that proved that it was possible to be both profitable and ethical, to serve both shareholders and society. It pioneered new technologies that not only revolutionized the transportation and energy sectors, but also addressed some of the world's most pressing social problems, from clean water to affordable housing. The Academy, in turn, became a global institution, with satellite campuses in developing countries all over the world, providing a world-class education to a new generation of leaders, innovators, and change-makers. It was a testament to the universal power of education, to the idea that talent knows no borders, that genius can be found in the most unlikely of places. Leo, now a man in his middle age, a respected global leader and philanthropist, never lost the humility and the sense of gratitude that had been forged in the crucible of his difficult childhood. He remained a hands-on leader, a mentor to the students at the academy, a man who was more comfortable in a workshop than in a boardroom. He never forgot the lessons he had learned from his father, from his mother, from Arthur. He lived his life according to a simple, unwavering moral code, a code that was based on the principles of integrity, compassion, and a deep, abiding belief in the inherent goodness of people. He married a woman who shared his values, a brilliant scientist who became his partner in both life and work. And they had children of their own, children who were raised not with a sense of entitlement, but with a sense of responsibility, a sense of duty to use their own privilege to help others. The story of his first meeting with Arthur became a part of his family's own personal mythology, a story that he told his children not as a fairy tale, but as a true account of the transformative power of a single, small act of kindness. And so, the ripple continued to spread, its circles widening, its influence growing, its message of hope and redemption echoing through the years. It was a message that was as simple as it was profound. A message that had been born on a rainy afternoon in a forgotten corner of a city. A message that had been whispered in the quiet, desperate plea of a hungry child. "I'll repair your car for a meal." It was a message that reminded the world that the greatest journeys often begin with the smallest of steps, that the most profound transformations are often sparked by the most unlikely of encounters, and that the most enduring legacies are not written in stone, but in the hearts of the people we touch along the way. The boy who had fixed a car for Emil had, in the end, done so much more. He had fixed a broken man. He had fixed a broken system, and he had, in his own small, quiet way, helped to fix the world. Decades later, an elderly Leo, his hair now a distinguished silver, his face a roadmap of a life rich with experience and purpose, found himself back in that same forgotten corner of the city. The industrial wasteland of his youth was now a distant memory, replaced by the thriving, vibrant campus of the Thomas Vance Memorial Engineering Academy. He was there to give the commencement address to the graduating class, a new generation of bright, ambitious young people who were about to go out and make their own mark on the world. As he stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of hopeful faces, he felt a profound sense of connection to the past, to the present, and to the future. He saw in the eyes of the students the same spark of ambition, the same hunger for knowledge, the same desire to make a difference that had once burned within him. He saw the future, and it was bright. He told them his story, the story of the poor boy and the wealthy businessman, the story that had become the founding myth of the academy. He told it not as a story of his own personal success, but as a story of the power of human connection, of the importance of empathy, of the transformative potential of a single act of grace. He spoke of Arthur, not as a billionaire, but as a man who had been lost and had found his way back. A man who had learned that true wealth is not measured in possessions, but in the love and respect of those whose lives you have touched. "I was once a boy who had nothing," he said, his voice filled with a quiet, powerful emotion. "I was hungry, I was desperate, I was invisible, but one man who had every reason to ignore me, chose to see me. He chose to take a chance on me. He chose to invest in me. And that one act of kindness, that one small leap of faith, changed my life forever. It is a lesson that I have carried with me every day of my life. It is the lesson that is at the very heart of this institution. And it is the lesson that I want to leave with you today. As you go out into the world, as you build your own futures, as you achieve your own great successes, I ask you to remember this. The greatest gift you can ever give is the gift of seeing someone. The greatest investment you can ever make is in the potential of another human being. And the most powerful force for change in the world is, and always will be, a single, simple, transformative act of kindness. When he had finished, the auditorium erupted in a thunderous, sustained applause, a wave of emotion and gratitude that washed over him. He looked out at the young faces, at the future leaders and innovators and change-makers, and he knew that the ripple was still spreading, that the legacy of his and Arthur's story was in safe hands. Later that day, as the sun was setting, casting a long, golden glow over the campus, Leo took a walk alone, his steps leading him to a quiet, secluded corner of the grounds. A small, simple memorial garden. In the center of the garden was a single polished granite bench, and on the bench was a simple inscription. In memory of Arthur Vance, who taught us that the best way to fix the world is to first fix a broken heart. He sat on the bench, the cool stone, a comfort against his weary bones, and he looked out at the city, at the gleaming skyscrapers that pierced the evening sky, at the vibrant, bustling metropolis that he had helped to build. He thought of his own long, improbable journey, a journey that had taken him from the depths of poverty to the heights of success, a journey that had been guided by the steady, unwavering light of a single, profound friendship. He closed his eyes, and he could almost hear the sound of the rain, the purr of a newly repaired engine, the quiet, gruff voice of a man who had lost his way and had been found. He was a boy again, small and hungry and full of a fierce, desperate hope. And he was an old man, full of a deep, abiding gratitude. A man who had lived a life beyond his wildest dreams. A man who had learned the most important lesson of all. That the greatest treasures in life are not the ones we acquire, but the ones we give away. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the first stars of the evening were beginning to prick the velvety twilight sky. A cool breeze rustled the leaves in the memorial garden, a gentle, soothing sound that seemed to whisper of the passage of time, of the cyclical nature of life, of the enduring power of memory. Leo remained on the bench, lost in his thoughts, a solitary figure in the gathering gloom. He was no longer the celebrated innovator, the global leader, the philanthropist. He was just a man, an old man, reflecting on the long, strange, wonderful journey of his life. He thought of his parents, of their simple, honest love, of the unwavering moral compass they had instilled in him. He thought of Maria, his beloved wife, his partner in all things, the woman who had stood by his side through all the triumphs and the trials, her love a constant, steady anchor in the often turbulent sea of his life. He thought of his children and his grandchildren, the branches of a family tree that had grown strong and tall from the seeds of a single, unlikely friendship. He felt a profound sense of peace, of contentment, of a life that had been lived to the fullest, a life that had been rich with meaning and purpose. He had not just built a company, he had built a family. He had not just made a fortune, he had made a difference. He had not just achieved success, he had found joy. As the darkness deepened, a young security guard, making his nightly rounds, approached the garden. He saw the old man sitting on the bench, and he was about to ask him to leave, to tell him that the campus was closing for the night. But then he recognized him. It was Leo, the founder, the legend, the man whose story was an inspiration to them all. The young guard, a recent graduate of the academy himself, a boy from a poor neighborhood who had been given a chance, a boy who owed his own future to the vision of the man sitting on the garden, stopped in his tracks. He didn't say a word. He simply stood at a respectful distance, a silent, watchful guardian, keeping vigil over the old man and his memories. And in that quiet, simple act of respect, in that unspoken acknowledgement of a shared history, of a debt of gratitude, the ripple continued to spread. It was a ripple that had started with a broken-down car, a hungry child, a grieving father. It was a ripple that had grown into a wave that had washed over a city, an industry, a world. It was a wave that had cleansed and healed and transformed. It was a wave that was still moving, still growing, its power undiminished by the passage of time. The old man on the bench, the young guard at the gate, they were both a part of that wave, carried along by its gentle, inexorable current. They were both a part of the story, a story that had no end, a story that would continue to be told, to be lived, to be passed on. A timeless, universal story of the enduring power of the human heart. A story that had begun so long ago with a simple, desperate, and ultimately world-changing plea. I'll repair your car for a meal. The moon, a perfect silver disk, had risen high in the sky, casting a soft, ethereal glow over the sleeping campus. The young security guard was still at his post, a silent sentinel in the cool night air. The old man on the bench had not moved, his posture one of quiet, peaceful contemplation. It was as if he was in communion with the spirits of the past, with the ghosts of his own long, remarkable life. He was no longer just Leo, the man. He was a symbol, an icon, a living testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. He was the embodiment of a simple, profound idea, an idea that had been the guiding principle of his life, an idea that was etched into the very foundations of the academy that surrounded him, that our lives are not defined by what we have, but by what we give, not by what we achieve for ourselves, but by what we do for others. Not by the walls we build to keep people out, but by the bridges we build to bring them together. The story of Leo and Arthur was more than just a story of a poor boy and a rich man. It was a story about the interconnectedness of all things, about the invisible threads that bind us to one another, about the profound and often unseen ways in which our lives touch and shape the lives of others. It was a story that reminded us that we are all, in the end, just travelers on the same long, winding road, and that the greatest kindness we can show is to stop and help a fellow traveler who has broken down along the way. It was a story that had been written not in ink, but in deeds, not on paper, but in the hearts and minds of a generation. And it was a story that would continue to be written, long after the old man on the bench had gone to his final rest, long after the young guard at the gate had grown old himself. It would be written in the lives of the students who would graduate from the academy, in the innovations they would create, in the problems they would solve, in the better world they would build. It would be written in the quiet, everyday acts of kindness that are inspired by their example, in the small, seemingly insignificant moments of grace that have the power to change a life, to change a city, to change the world. The old man on the bench finally stirred, the cool night air having seeped into his old bones. He rose slowly, his movements stiff but steady, and he began the long, slow walk back to his home. A simple, comfortable house that was, by his own design, just a short walk from the campus he had built. As he walked, he passed under the soft, warm glow of the streetlights, his long shadow stretching out behind him like a memory. He was just an old man, walking home in the moonlight, his heart full, his soul at peace. But he was also a giant, a man whose life had cast a long, benevolent shadow over the world, a man whose story would be told and retold, a timeless, enduring fable of the redemptive power of the human heart. And the ripple, the endless, ever-widening ripple, continued to spread out into the cool, silent night, a gentle, insistent whisper of hope in a world that so often seems to have forgotten how to listen. The first rays of dawn were beginning to paint the eastern sky in soft pastel shades of pink and orange, heralding the arrival of a new day. The campus of the Thomas Vance Memorial Engineering Academy was beginning to stir. The first students arriving for their early morning classes, their young faces bright with the promise of the day ahead. The old man, Leo, had long since returned to his home, to the warm embrace of his family. His nightly vigil in the memorial garden, a quiet, personal ritual that he shared with no one. The young security guard, his shift now over, was walking home, his mind still filled with the image of the old man on the bench, his heart still moved by the quiet power of that simple, profound moment. As he walked, he passed a young boy, no older than 10, sitting on the curb, his head in his hands, tears of frustration streaming down his face. Beside him, on the sidewalk, lay a bicycle, its chain broken, its front wheel bent at an unnatural angle. The boy was on his way to school, and now he was stranded. His day, and perhaps his future, derailed by a simple, cruel twist of fate. People rushed past, their faces buried in their phones, their minds preoccupied with the urgent, relentless demands of their own lives. They didn't see the boy. Or if they did, they chose to ignore him. Another small, insignificant problem in a world that was already overflowing with them. But the young security guard, the boy from the poor neighborhood, the graduate of the academy, the inheritor of a legacy of kindness, he saw him. He stopped, and he knelt down beside the crying child, his voice gentle, his eyes full of a kind, compassionate understanding. "What's wrong?" he asked. The boy looked up, his eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and hope. "My bike!" he sobbed. "It's broken! I'm going to be late for my exam. I'm going to fail." The young security guard smiled, a warm, reassuring smile that instantly calmed the boy's fears. "Don't worry," he said. "I can fix it." And as he reached for the broken chain, his hands sure and steady, his heart full, the ripple, the endless, ever-widening ripple, continued to spread. A new story beginning, a new life being touched, a new future being rewritten. All because of a simple, profound, and endlessly repeating act of kindness. The legacy of the boy who had fixed a car for a meal was not just a story. It was a living, breathing thing. A force for good in the world. A gentle, insistent reminder that the best way to fix the world is to start by fixing a single broken thing, whether it's an engine, a heart, or a child's bicycle. on a bright, beautiful morning. The young security guard, whose name was Samuel, worked with a quiet, practiced efficiency. His hands, though not as greasy as Leo's had been all those years ago, moving with a similar, innate understanding of mechanics. He straightened the bent wheel, reattached the broken chain, and with a final, satisfying click, the bicycle was whole again. The little boy, whose name was Daniel, watched in wide-eyed amazement, his tears forgotten, his heart filled with a profound sense of gratitude. "How did you do that?" he asked, his voice full of a childlike wonder. Samuel smiled. "I learned from the best," he said, a cryptic answer that the boy could not possibly understand. He helped Daniel to his feet, brushed the dirt from his clothes, and gave him a gentle, encouraging pat on the back. "Now, hurry," he said. "You don't want to be late for your exam." Daniel nodded, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated joy. He hopped on his bike, and as he rode away, he turned and shouted back, his voice ringing with a heartfelt gratitude. "Thank you. I'll never forget this." Samuel watched him go, a small, solitary figure pedaling furiously towards his future, and he felt a warmth spread through his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the morning Sunday. He had not just fixed a bicycle. He had, in his own small way, paid forward the debt of gratitude he owed to a man he had never met, to a story that had become a part of his own. He knew, with a certainty that went deeper than words, that he was a part of that story now, a link in a long, unbroken chain of kindness, a chain that stretched back through the years, to a rainy afternoon, a broken-down car, and a small, hungry boy who had offered to trade his skills for a meal. The ripple had reached him, and now, through him, it would continue to spread, its circles widening, its influence growing, its gentle, persistent current shaping the course of lives in ways that were both profound and unseen. As Samuel turned to continue his walk home, his heart light, his spirit renewed, he knew that the story was not over. It would never be over. It would be told and retold, lived and relived, in 1,000 different ways, in 1,000 different places, by 1,000 different people. It was a story that was written in the very fabric of the city, in the DNA of the academy, in the hearts of all those who had been touched by its simple, powerful message. It was a story of hope, of redemption, of the enduring power of the human spirit. And it was a story that would continue to unfold, a timeless, universal fable that would echo through the generations, a gentle, insistent whisper of a single, profound truth, that the world can be a dark and difficult place, but that there is always light, there is always hope, and that the greatest and most enduring light of all is the one that is sparked by a single, simple, and endlessly repeating act of kindness. The story of Helios Motors, of the Thomas Vance Memorial Engineering Academy, of Leo and Arthur, became more than just a local legend. It became a global phenomenon, a case study that was taught in business schools and universities all over the world. It was a story that challenged the old, cynical assumptions about the nature of capitalism, a story that offered a new, more hopeful model for the future of business, a model that was based not on the relentless pursuit of profit at any cost, but on the creation of shared value, on the idea that a company can be both successful and socially responsible, both innovative and ethical. Leo, though he remained the driving force behind the company, became more than just a CEO. He became a global statesman, a respected voice on the world stage, a tireless advocate for a more just, a more sustainable, and a more compassionate world. He used his immense wealth and influence to tackle some of the world's most intractable problems, from poverty and inequality to climate change and disease. He was a man who had been given a second chance, and he spent the rest of his life making sure that others had the same opportunity. The Academy, too, became more than just a school. It became a global network of educational institutions, a beacon of hope in some of the world's most disadvantaged communities. It was a place where the next generation of leaders, of innovators, of changemakers were being forged. A generation that was armed not just with knowledge, but with a deep, abiding sense of purpose. A generation that was committed to building a better world for all. And so, the ripple, the endless, ever-widening ripple, continued to spread. Its influence reaching the farthest corners of the globe, its message of hope and redemption, resonating with people from all walks of life. It was a message that transcended culture, and language, and religion. It was a message that spoke to the deepest, most universal human aspirations. The desire for connection, the yearning for purpose, the belief in the possibility of a better world. The story of the poor boy and the wealthy businessman had become a modern-day myth. A story that was as timeless as it was timely. A story that reminded a world that was often fractured by division and conflict of the simple, profound truth that we are all in this together, that our fates are intertwined, and that the only way forward is to move forward together, with compassion, with empathy, and with a deep, abiding faith in the inherent goodness of the human heart. The legacy of that rainy afternoon, of that broken-down car, of that simple, desperate plea, was not just a company, or an academy, or a fortune. It was a movement, a global movement of people who believed in the power of kindness, who were committed to making a difference, who were working, in their own small, quiet ways, to fix a broken world, one small, simple, and endlessly repeating act of grace at a time. As the years turned into decades, and the world continued to change in ways that were both predictable and profound, the story of Leo and Arthur remained a constant, a fixed point in a rapidly shifting landscape. It was a story that was told to children at bedtime, a story that was studied by scholars in universities, a story that was whispered in the quiet, hopeful conversations of people who dared to dream of a better world. The names of the protagonists might change, the details of the story might be altered to fit the context of the times, but the essential truth of the story remained the same. It was a story about the power of empathy, about the importance of seeing the humanity in others, about the transformative potential of a single, unexpected moment of connection. It was a story that reminded a world that was increasingly defined by technology and data that the most important connections are not the ones that are made online, but the ones that are made in person, face to face, heart to heart. It was a story that served as a powerful antidote to the cynicism and the despair that so often seem to poison the well of modern life. It was a story that reminded us that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, there is always the possibility of redemption, and that the smallest spark of light can, in the end, illuminate the entire world. The legacy of Helios Motors and the Thomas Vance Memorial Engineering Academy continued to flourish, their influence a testament to the enduring power of their founding principles. They were institutions that were not just successful, but also beloved. Institutions that had earned the trust and the respect of a world that was hungry for leaders who were not just smart, but also wise, not just powerful, but also compassionate, not just successful, but also good. And so, the story continued. A story without an end. A story that was constantly being rewritten, constantly being reimagined, constantly being lived out in the lives of ordinary people who were doing extraordinary things. It was a story that was as old as humanity itself. A story that had been told in countless ways, in countless cultures, throughout the long, winding course of human history. It was the story of the Good Samaritan, the story of the prodigal son, the story of the unlikely hero who rises from obscurity to change the world. It was a story that spoke to the very best of who we are and who we can be. And it all began so long ago on a rainy afternoon, in a forgotten corner of a city, with a simple, desperate, and ultimately world-changing plea. I'll repair your car for a meal. It was a plea that had been answered, a plea that had sparked a revolution, a plea that had reminded the world of a simple, profound, and timeless truth. All seven, and of not clothed, that the greatest and most enduring power in the universe is the power of a single, transformative, and endlessly repeating act of human kindness. The world moved on, as it always does. New technologies were invented, new empires were built, new challenges arose to test the resilience of the human spirit. But the story of Leo and Arthur, of the boy who fixed a car for a meal, endured. It became a touchstone, a cultural artifact. A story that was woven into the very fabric of the society it had helped to shape. It was a story that was told and retold, each telling a new ripple in the ever-widening circle of its influence. It was a story that reminded a world that was often obsessed with the new, with the next big thing, of the timeless, enduring power of the old, simple truths. The importance of integrity, the value of compassion, the strength of the human heart. The institutions that Leo and Arthur had built, Helios Motors and the Thomas Vance Memorial Engineering Academy, became more than just a company and a school. They became a living legacy, a testament to the power of a single, transformative idea. They were institutions that were constantly evolving, constantly adapting, constantly pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But they never lost sight of their founding principles, of the simple, unwavering moral compass that had guided them from the very beginning. They were institutions that were built not on the shifting sands of profit and expediency, but on the solid rock of human values. And so, the story continued. A story that was not confined to the pages of a book, but was written in the lives of the people it had touched, in the better world it had helped to create. It was a story that was as much about the future as it was about the past. A story that was a constant, gentle reminder that the world we live in is not something that is given to us, but something that we create every day, with our choices, with our actions, with our single, simple, and endlessly repeating act of kindness. The boy who fixed a car for a meal had become a man, an old man, and then a memory. But his story, his legacy, his spirit, lived on, a timeless, enduring beacon of hope in a world that would always be in need of a little repair. And so, the tale of the boy with grease-stained hands and the billionaire with a broken heart became a quiet anthem for a world weary of cynicism. It was a story that did not shout, but whispered. A reminder that the most seismic shifts in our lives often begin with the softest of footsteps, with a single hesitant offer of help. It was a testament to the fact that true value is not found in the cold, hard certainty of a balance sheet, but in the warm, uncertain, and ultimately priceless connection between two human souls. The legacy was not in the gleaming towers or the revolutionary engines, but in the simple, replicable act of seeing another person's need and choosing to meet it, not with the detached charity of the powerful, but with the shared humanity of a fellow traveler. It was a legacy that lived on in the young security guard who stopped to fix a child's bicycle, in the graduates of the academy who used their brilliance to serve the underserved, in the countless, nameless individuals who, having heard the story, chose to act with a little more kindness, a little more empathy, a little more grace. The ripple, which had started with a single, desperate plea on a rainy afternoon, had become a vast, gentle tide, a tide that was slowly, imperceptibly, but surely, turning the course of the world. It was a tide that was washing away the grime of indifference, nourishing the seeds of hope, and reminding a world that had so often lost its way of the simple, profound, and enduring truth that the most powerful engine for change is not made of steel and wire, but of the simple, beautiful, and endlessly resilient stuff of the human heart. And it all began with a boy, a car, and a quiet, world-changing bargain that proved, once and for all, that the best and most lasting repairs are the ones that are performed not for the promise of a fortune, but for the